Hello, people of planet Earth as well as the aliens of outer space. I welcome you to my channel. My name is Harris, and today I'm going to be teaching you, educating you, sharing knowledge on how to successfully beat higher challenges and curses in the game called Soulstone Survivors. Soulstone Survivors is another one in the line of auto shooters, the genre populated mostly by vampire survivors and hundreds of the clones that it spawned, but it's actually probably the best iteration of the genre in my opinion. I've played most of the games that were released in this sort of subset of the genre, and this is by far my favorite. I put around 50 hours, give or take. I'm unlocked every character, every room, with every stage on the highest curse possible, and I've seen some people having some trouble and struggling, starting with probably curse level 5 in the Steam board discussion. So today I'm here to share a few tips and tricks, as well as 6 really, but mostly 5 builds that will carry you through at the very least curse 5 difficulty, though in my experience all of these builds can clear as far as curse 7 difficulties on all stages if you get some lucky rolls. Now I'm gonna specify that 2 of these builds can do so without being super lucky, but then again, if you want to push the game as much as you can, you kind of have to get some luck. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's jump right into the first build that I'm not going to develop fully because it's the beam build. It's a build that everyone knows. You basically just pick light beam as your attack. You don't need anything else, and I'm not even joking. You can literally just pick 6 light beams as your attack options, and it's by far the most broken build in the game. The reason why I don't want to develop it any further is because it's gonna get nerfed. It's not just the best of the strong builds, it's by far the strongest build in the game, to the point that no other build can come even close to the damage output that this build can do. The only thing you really need is to just stack 6 beams, frequency, and multicast, and then just siphon into defense. That's it. You're gonna be nuking bosses in seconds, even once you get into 4, 5, and 6 cycles of the Endless. It's an absolutely bonkers build, and if you're completely struggling, at least until they don't nerf it, just pick any of the characters, honestly, and you can just stack on the ability to pick up this spell from the onset and just go to town with 6 light beams. You're gonna be destroying everything, and it's a fun build, don't get me wrong, but it's also one that's most likely gonna get nerfed, so I don't want to put too much hope into it, but it's there if you want to. Just as you can see on the screen, I'm just mowing down everyone. Admittedly, this is, I think, curse 6, because at the time of recording, I haven't beaten the 7th stage just yet of this map. But even, if I'm mowing down everything on curses at this high of a level, at curse 7, the first stage, you're gonna be doing basically the same. The only gatekeeping thing about this build is, luck to roll enough light beams. But with 5 rerolls and 5 banishes, you can pretty reliably get at least 3, 4, which is more than enough to clean your way through everything. Anyway, the first build that I'm truly want to talk about, the one that I'm really excited about, is the build I called Dotted Doom. I know, sounds mysterious. I primarily play Chaos Walker class with this build, though you can pretty much play every class with every build in this game, with the exception of the couple. But Chaos Walker I pick for the reason that it synergizes really well with dot builds in general. Now, dot builds in general are a build that's highly viable, even up to curse 7, but when it goes from highly viable to kind of broken and OP is when you do the Dotted Doom build, which means that you pick a rune called Synergizer, which basically gives you those level up options that says if you have slow, then there's a chance you're going to burn the target. If you have poison, then there's a chance you're going to doom the target, etc. The primary goal of this build is to get Doom stacking as high as possible and as quickly as possible. For this, the only options you pick leveling up are frequency and multicast. Raw damage is non-existent in this build. You're going to be doing piss poor damage from the onset. Main goal is to fire off as many particles as possible to stack as many stacks of doom and other ailments in general, so that the bosses start dying from like 15 million HP without a joke. Spells that work really well with this build are Shadow Orb, Shadow Bolt, virtually anything that fires a lot of projectiles and that has sub 4-5 second cooldown. Anything beyond that, it's a bit too bursty to work with this build. Furthermore, boosters such as Arcane and Bloodlust work really well. So usually my build goes Chaos Missile, at least 2 Shadow Orbs, Arcane, a power up, as well as Bloodlust, and then the last slot, I just slot in whatever I find. Sometimes I go from the bomb build that also has a lot of particles flying around, if I have an extra rune point lying around or not. Sometimes I go for Blade Storm, that's also an option. But yeah, Shadow Orb works really well with this build. Doom, stacking, dot build. Beyond active skills, what you want to take in general are all the dots you can find, so slow burn, poison, doom, burn, fragility, everything, but mostly just doom. And with synergy runes selected, what you can do is transfer a lot of these individual dots into extra dots. So what happens is you poison a target, you get a doom stack. You poison the target 15 times in a second, you get like 7 doom stacks. So it just exponentially starts exploding because, for instance, there's an option to transfer, I think it's slow into poison or burn into poison, something into poison, and then those stacks that transfer then transfer into doom, and you just see these stacks going up and up. At the highest, at the curse level 7, I had bosses dying from like 60 million HP, just dropping dead with how quickly I was stacking dooms. Eventually, obviously, this build, as almost every build outside of probably beams and the other build that I'm going to mention in this video, are going to flatten during the scaling of the game, but this can carry you through every Curse 7. It's a really solid build that doesn't rely on a lot of luck because most of the powers you're going to be needing are very common. Every single ailment in this game is common and you're going to get them frequently enough. The only true gatekeeping part is the frequency and multicasting. If you don't get it early on, you can actually get overwhelmed before your build can take off. It takes a while, admittedly, for this build to really kick in. So if you don't get lucky before the first set of bosses, I would honestly restart a stage. If you're struggling with the first set of bosses and then the second spawns before you can kill the first, you've fallen far too behind to actually beat the game. So just restart and pray for better luck next time around. The second build that I'm going to talk to you about today is the one I call Legal Bomber. This build is all about just throwing as many things at the screen as possible. Usually I play with the Houndmaster because it synergizes really well. And the point of this build, unlike the previous one, is to just pour out as much raw damage across as wide of a surface as you possibly can. So, for this, what you want to take is multicasting and frequency. In general, with every single build that you're going to see, frequency and multicasting are a must. They're the best, by far the best options. Additionally, you are going to want to take raw damage, every single raw damage, especially the ones that increase physical damage, because all of your spells are going to be doing physical damage. Bloodlust also works really well with this build. It synergizes fairly well. And Area is another one that you don't want to pick as a Chaos Walker and dot build, but here you do want to pick up because eventually your entire screen is just going to be bombs. This build, however, is really reliant on luck. At Curse 7, because of the character that's inherently really slow, by the way, I forgot to mention the first thing about this game. He's a big trick, big tip. Stack as much movement speed as you physically can. Never select anything if you have an option of 30% movement speed. I legit say this with the love in my heart. If you have a legendary option that increases your DPS by like 80% across the board, select 30% movement speed. At higher curse intensities, especially during the deep endless runs, things get super fast. Projectiles come en masse. There's like hundreds of red circles on the ground that you can't dodge with just dashing. And movement speed is an absolute necessity of every single build, by the way. Not just this one or the previous one. Every single build needs you to build movement speed at high curse levels. Anyway, back to the build itself. As I said, area, frequency, multicast, and raw damage just big bomb options, honestly. Avoid frag shots, avoid anything going in the straight line. You want to spread out as much as possible. So sharper bombs, bombardment, mortar shot, the original Houndmaster spell also works really well, though I tend to replace it later on in the run. Again, Bloodlust works really well. This is one of the builds where you can get away without stacking abilities together. A lot of the builds in this game rely on you being able to stack, so you need to unlock the rune, which allows you to pick the same skill multiple times. So this is one of those builds where you don't actually need to do that. You just stack different types of bombs, and eventually, if you get lucky rolls, you're going to be bombing the living hell out of everything. You're going to be doing a lot of damage across a wide area to the point where you really won't have to worry about getting in close and deep with the bosses that can just sort of nuke you. But again, the issue with this build is that it takes a lucky roll very early on, otherwise you will be suffocated immediately. Your starting spell is not that great, it doesn't do a lot of damage, so you need to get really lucky with the second one, and at most the third one. If you flunk out by the third one, it's probably best to just restart the run, especially at like Curse level 7, where before the first boss even spawns, you already know whether you're going to be able to complete the map or not. Moving on to the third build. This is probably the strongest build in the game, next to the Beam build. I call this Holy Cannon. It's the Paladin class build, which relies entirely on one spell, just like Light Beam, which is Holy Fire. Holy Fire is all about crit stacking because it deals 300% more damage in crit form. So this is one of those builds that requires you to stack multiple instances of the same spell. So if you don't have that rune unlocked, you probably don't really want to play this build, because single Holy Fire, while it's an amazing spell, can't carry in Curse 7. But if you are getting into Curse 7, you probably have unlocked the Singularity, I think is the name of the rune, which allows you to select a single spell multiple times. Holy Fire times 4 at the very least. You can leave the initial spell the paladins get, because it increases the chance to get critically hit. Eventually, once you get to like 100% crit chance, you can just swap it for another Holy Fire. Bloodlust, Arcane, either one of those works. Probably even Might, the third boost, works just as well. The point of this build is to just stack everything we told before, so area, multicast, and frequency. But when it comes to raw damage, just stack crit chance and crit damage. Eventually, you're going to be nuking bosses real fast. I think of all the footage you're seeing here, the only one that's recorded on an actually Curse 7 level is this one. Every other one is, I think, Curse level 6. I'm not sure, it's been a while since I've recorded them. But yeah, this is, I do remember distinctly, this is Curse level 7, because I was really shocked. This was my first time trying this build, by the way. That's how you know it's kind of OP. You just stack crit chance, crit damage, and then the standard frequency multicast area. Obviously sprinkling in some raw damage in between, and as I said before, movement speed, because Paladin is also really slow from the base. It's a bit tankier than most other classes, so you can get away with kind of skimping on speed early on, but you desperately do need movement speed, just as with every other class in the game. Here's another tip: if you ever get an extra dash option, take it over literally everything, even movement speed. Dashes in this game are broken, and you desperately need them at high curse levels. So yeah, it's a very simple build, honestly. Like, probably the easiest one to play, because you can just stack a lot of tankiness on top of everything. Secondly, it's not super luck reliant. Like, you can start with a rune that affords you an extra weapon, which will be Holy Fire. So you already start the game with a singular instance of Holy Fire, which makes your early game super easy, because that thing slaps even early on without any upgrades. You're going to be mowing down elites like no tomorrow, probably better than any other class in the game. And you can probably roll 2-3 extra Holy Fires through 5 rerolls and 5 banishes. From then on, it's just stacking tankiness, speed, and frequency, multicast, area, yada yada yada. And you're gonna be on your way to the top. Yay! Moving on to the last build that I'm gonna recommend for climbing. The last build that I'm gonna talk about is a fun build that I really enjoy playing. But this is more a straightforward build called Machine Gun Sentinel build. As the name suggests, you play the Sentinel. The footage you're seeing wound up being kind of a mixed match between machine gun and area, bombardment, poison, dot build. It's a very strange build that I wasn't planning on building. It just sort of turned out that way because I wasn't really getting lucky with anything. The point of this build is to take as many frontal-facing abilities as you can. So shoot, multi-shoot, poison bolts, all the bolts, sharpnel, frag shot, anything that has preferably multiple projectiles, but not necessarily. The key point is to have like sub 3 second base cooldown. Anything above 3 seconds is a bit too slow. With high frequency upgrades, it's never going to get that low. So just start picking stuff that's frontal and it has sub 3 seconds base cooldown. Eventually, with enough frequency multicast, you're going to be just machine gunning all over the map. It's a really strong build. I've actually cleared Curse 7 with the original intent of this build, which didn't rely on frag shots and sniper shots. These are just not the options, but you can copy this build that you're seeing in Curse 6, which worked well enough for me. It was a bit sweaty at points, but it's functional, I guess. It wouldn't carry through a Curse 7 though. It's not good enough. A frag shot is a bit too slow. As well as sniper shot, it didn't deal nearly enough damage as I thought it would. Then again, I didn't really start crits, so that might be on me. Anyway, as I said before, this class is also good because you start with 3 dashes, and that immediately makes it better than most other classes in the game. You also start a bit faster, I think, and your initial 2 spells are fairly decent, especially if you unlock the second weapon. I wouldn't take the second weapon rune though. It's not great. You're going to be replacing it because it's a bomb, but if you're lacking early game damage, you can slot it in there and just replace it later on. Those are like 4-5 builds arguably that I recommend you try if you're struggling with Curse 5, 6 and especially 7. So in order of how easy would it be to clear probably Curse 7, I would go to Paladin, Chaos Walker, Sentinel, and lastly Houndmaster. The problem with Houndmaster is that it's the slowest of all of them. It's not really tanky, and its base spell is bad. It doesn't deal enough damage. So if you don't get super lucky in the early rolls as the Houndmaster, run is dead. Whereas with every other class that I mentioned, you can kind of cheese your way through the first probably set of elites, which will build you like 10 levels, which allows you more room to sort of maneuver through to discover the spells that you actually need for your build. Now onto the last build that I want to mention. I don't recommend this build for climbing because you can't use it. You kind of need to defeat Curse 7 map to unlock the character, which is the Death Knight. He's a guy with a horsey. Now I absolutely adore this class. It's my favorite class because it's faster than any other class in the game, and because it doesn't have dashes, its walking has a base iframe animation. So you can actually kind of get clipped by something, but if you step out of it quickly enough, you won't take any damage. It's super nice. Super nice. Beyond that, however, the only build that I actually enjoy playing with this class is called Doom. It's as simple as I just call it Doom. The point of the build is to take the spell called Ray of Doom, stack 4 of them, get Bloodlust, and just go to town with it. The build is super reliant on luck, by the way. If you don't get Rays of Doom stacking, if you don't get early damage and frequency and multicast stacking, it falls off the cliff because it can't stack Doom quickly enough. To sort of circumvent this, you can pick up an early copy of Bladestorm. It's probably the strongest early game spell that can help you sort of transition into the mid game. If you don't get at least 3 Rays of Doom before the first set of bosses, I would honestly just restart. It's not gonna go well because Ray of Doom in and of itself doesn't really do that much damage. It stacks Doom, however. And if you can get enough frequency and multicast and enough area, you can basically sit in one place and have these beams of purple Doom just sort of swirling around you in this massive area, massive scale, nuking bosses from the orbit. It's similar to the Chaos Walker build, except you don't stack other dots. You literally just stack Doom, Doom, movement speed, tankiness, and then more Doom. Doom in general is really good in this game if you haven't noticed it. It's not good on its own, but if you can get stacking fast enough, it's really good. Anyway, those were, well, actually turned out to be 6 classes that, not classes, builds, that I sort of recommend in very specific situations. Now, if you're struggling with early stages, honestly, there's no huge tip. The most important part of this game, I feel, beginners will overlook is movement speed. Get as much movement speed as you possibly can. Kiting is really important to this game. Don't dash into walls because the game is really weird about it. Uh, Once you get into high curse intensities, turn down the visibility of spells. Okay, just turn them down. You won't see shit. In terms of what you need, across every class, I feel multicast goes first. Damage raw mostly goes second. Frequency goes third in terms of damage output. Multicast is really good at this game, especially for some spells like Ray of Doom, for instance, or anything that projects a lot of projectiles. Shadow Orb, multi-shot, spread shot, any bomb. So anything that can project a lot of stuff, multicast is really good. Beyond that, stack health only. Health is probably secondary to movement speed in terms of necessity. Defense, armor, blocking, the only one that I would honestly take is flat damage reduction. You get those sometimes where it says reduce damage by 2 flat. That's probably the strongest one in my opinion. But I still wouldn't really take it over offense. At a certain point, no amount of defense is going to outscale the damage you're going to receive. It's just physically impossible. So it's always best to just nuke things before they can sort of overwhelm you. Hopefully that was in any capacity helpful for you guys. If you have any more struggles, let me know in the comments. I'm going to try and help you as much as I can. I know they can be a bit difficult to transition from fairly casual, like Curse 3 is still fairly easy. Once you get to Curse 5, you can get really overwhelmed really quickly if you don't know what you're doing properly. So if you're struggling, let me know. I'm going to try and help you as much as I can. Anyway, thank you for watching, and go on and kill stuff, I guess. Thank you, and see you some other time. Cheers!